morning. I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning. As we get started, we're going to ask Brother Mike McFarland to lead us in a word of prayer.
Holy Father in heaven, we thank you for this day and many blessings you have given all of us. We thank you for this opportunity we have to come together, worship you, and sing songs of praise unto you and study your word once again. Be with us throughout this class time. May we learn the things that we need to learn, apply them to our lives, and the knowledge of the way of your way, and not the way of man. This and all things we ask in thy Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Last week, we resumed our lesson talking about the sponsoring church. We had gone through what it was and how they operated, and then we were answering some questions. And as part of the answers, we were getting into the organization of the church. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we continue on? We had gotten down to the study of the elders and the deacons in answering these questions, and we had noted that in the organization of the early church, when Paul was writing to the Philippians, that he specified that the people were at Philippi with the overseers and deacons, and so it implied that there were deacons and overseers at that place. We talked about the qualifications of an elder. We went through that. We discussed the qualifications of a deacon. There were some questions about the differences, and really I think that those are just cosmetic differences for the most part. The elders are expected to be a little more seasoned, more learned in the scripture. The deacons obviously it implies that they are younger in the faith and that they are learning how to do some of these things. Any comments or questions? No one's going to talk this morning. Okay. So the question is, can there be only one elder at a local congregation? No. In every instance where we have elders mentioned in connection with the church, there are plural elders in a single church. You can't find one where an elder was over more than one congregation. Doubtless there were congregations that did not have elders because Paul instructed Timothy and Titus to go and establish elders at these places, and that would imply a lack. But it was certainly the intent of God to have elders in the church. Okay. What is the role of elders? What are they supposed to do? Oversee? What does that mean? Excuse me?
Responsibility of the church.
They have the responsibility of the church. Okay. Does that just mean I'm supposed to look out over everybody? Help guide. Okay. So the roles and responsibilities, they are to oversee the congregation, and it says specifically, yes, sir, Mr. Williams.
Pardon me for interrupting you. Just to tell you about a funny story about an elder that my sister-in-law told me about. And there was an elder who thought oversee meant to get up and be above them so he could oversee them.
Okay. In case of someone taking it a little too literal. In the local church, the elders have authority to oversee the congregation, and that means to kind of guide, direct. It says not to act as lords. We're told specifically not to do that. There are duties that elders have to the congregation and duties that the congregation has to the elders. and to each other. It says members are to submit to one another. So there's not just elder to member, the members have duties to each other. And I think we need to emphasize that. I think we do that here. Yes, Senator.
Do you think really the church is for real without those?
I think it is incomplete. I think it is real. And for the reasons I said a while ago, obviously, when a church was first established, it couldn't come into being with elders that met all the qualifications of being that.
But didn't Paul and Timothy, he said, set elders over each congregation?
Yes, he did. And as I said, I think that meant that the churches are incomplete without elders. But I don't think he said, well, we don't care if they're not qualified.
No, I don't mean that.
Yeah, it was more important to be qualified rather than just say we've got an elder. So,
I have
yes.
a question. So what if no one in the congregation is actually qualified in the role of eldership? What happens?
That is a difficult question. And the only answer I could come up with would be that the individual members would have to act to the best of their ability. Now, in a lot of places that I've been, just based on the hierarchy mentioned in the Bible, the men would lead the congregation, and they would get together and make the decisions as best they could. The problems with that is that personalities can also often take over, and you have a man with a very strong personality who takes over the congregation and leads it into places it shouldn't go. So, yeah, and,
May I ask another part of that question?
oh, sure.
So as members of that congregation, do you think that we should make a decision as to seek out a congregation that does have an eldership?
I think to answer that question, it's a question of where can I get the best knowledge? Where can I be kept safe? Where can I ensure that I'm doing all I can to go to heaven? And, you know, if you know of an eldership that is functioning as it should, you know, if you have a choice between A and B, and A has elders and B doesn't, and otherwise, you know, they're both okay, then I think you should go to A. However, if A, the elderships there are leading them into areas that are wrong, I think you can make the argument to go to the other place.
So basically, we're looking for scripturally led congregations.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes, Mr. Williams.
If a congregation doesn't have elders, the question is, are they really working toward that end or not? Some of my relatives in Indianapolis have told me about one congregation, boy, when brethren wanted to have elders, they divided over that because they just didn't want any elders.
Right.
And if a church doesn't want elders, they don't want to be a New Testament church.
That's correct. Not wanting elders is a sign of sickness.
Churches that don't have, and they're qualified,
Well, I agree with that.
and they can't do anything about it, because they have to do the best they can.
Yeah. You know, if, let's say, a group of 20-year-olds moved to wherever and said, we're going to go establish a church here, but none of us are married and none of us had kids. Well, they can't be elders, but they can establish a church. So it'll be difficult.
As
Yeah.
a Christian, as a child of God, you are responsible for everybody who wants to be a child of God, a Christian. So if there's a congregation that don't have elders, and they are seeking to establish the truth, and you can help that congregation, aren't you obligated to go and help that congregation to point out how to and help them to establish men that are qualified?
We are each given different tasks to do. We each have different talents. Um, some people are able to go to another place and to teach and to help them do that. Other men may not be. For me to tell you that it's your wife's responsibility to go to that church and tell them how to set up an eldership, no, I can't do that. But if you wanted to go and talk about to them and help them, I think there would be no problem.
I'm not saying a person that's not qualified to do that, go do that, but if you are able, if you are strong enough as a Christian, then you are obligated to go and help.
I agree that,
I wouldn't suggest a babe in Christ go and do that.
oh, I agree. A babe in Christ should not. But neither should we sacrifice an elder here to send over somewhere else because they don't have them. Yes, Teddy?
I would add to what Steve is saying. If the congregation without elders ask for somebody from this congregation or another to come speak to them, to help them, to teach them, to show them what they need to do, for you, for any other elder to impose yourself upon that you're kind of getting close to the autonomy line there to say, look, you need me to come. If that church is looking to grow, they should be smart enough to know. It's like when congregations look for help with their singing.
Mm-hmm.
And they bring in somebody, they ask for somebody to come help. A church without elders, without scriptural leadership should be wise enough to see they need help if it's needed, and then seek out qualified men that can come help instruct them toward that end.
Yes, and it's very easy to do. You can ask a speaker to come for a meeting
Yes.
where you discuss the eldership. That's your purpose of this meeting, is to teach your congregation, what it is we need and plan to do it.
And I would say if, along Steve's thought, if that congregation asked this one for help, yes, I think we have that obligation to answer that call and to help.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be an elder.
No.
It could be someone, and I think that's what Steve is
Right.
saying, that it would be someone strong enough in the congregation that has the ability to go teach them and instruct them in that process, how they would go to that end.
Yes.
Selecting elders.
Yes. I agree.
That's the love of the brotherhood. I mean, even if you have to travel a bunch of miles to do this, if you love God and you love the brotherhood, then if you're strong enough, you should be willing to do that.
I agree. Yes, Jim.
Well, as someone with personal experience in a congregation without elders, I'm gonna have to say this, if another congregation had come to the Union congregation where I was attending and said we needed elders, I think we probably would have told them, well, we're a separate congregation, we're autonomous, we're doing very well without elders. And we were. We had 4 preachers that we supported. We had an active campaign in the community to try to draw people to attend there. And as far as faithful congregations, unfortunately, I would have to say we were more faithful than any, even in the cities that were around. So I felt very comfortable attending there. And it was very sound. We had sound preachers, and we managed the affairs. It was a small congregation, but the men there managed those affairs very well.
Mm-hmm. And you obviously,
But why didn't you have elders?
Well, because I would say there was probably 1 or 2 men there who were qualified. However, they did not desire the office.
But did your preachers who were so sound, did they teach the brethren there that they ought to work toward having elders?
No.
Elders, or having elders?
No, because
I don't see how preachers can be sound preachers if they don't teach a congregation where they are ones that they preach to, that they need elders.
I agree with that.
We all knew what the qualifications were, but there was no one there that was qualified. But we were all very steeped in the doctrine, and that's the good thing about God's providence. He has given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness through His Word.
I agree.
We follow the Word.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
The Apostle John makes it pretty clear in his short epistles that there were a lot of brethren who went out preaching among the churches and preaching to ones who weren't Christians along the way, and even in those cities where there were already churches. And how that if these brethren taught them something, they didn't feel insulted because they weren't quite doing things up to what they should be doing, but they were to accept such and support these persons. But they had to be bringing the doctrine of Christ and not something else to them.
Yes. Now, I don't think,
And as Steve said, this matter of brotherly love.
yes,
If a brother tells us something about what we need to do, even in this local congregation, one brother goes to another. I mean, even if the one being taught doesn't think that he needs the instruction, he's very thankful and appreciative and loving for the brother who would love him enough to come and tell him what he thinks.
yes.
But would I rather have another congregation who just 2 years later has internal strife and breaks on doctrinal issues, coming to a sound congregation and trying to explain to us that we need elders, with those who chose to attend there, none wished to be an elder that were qualified, but we were functioning. I think sometimes you have to say by their fruits you shall know them. I know a lot of congregations who are worshiping right now, though, that don't have elders, that basically are just meeting for convenience in a community. They have 10 or 12 people or less. They're not functioning.
Well, I will stick by the point that I made in answer to Sherry's question a while ago. If it's a choice between attending a church that has elders leading them in the wrong direction and a church without elders that is doing everything right, I'll go to where they're doing it right. However, for them to be satisfied in that situation is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really have to watch your attitude towards it. If somebody is trying to help you, and you don't see it that way,
Yeah, I'd be very offended if someone from somewhere else came in and started telling me we're doing things wrong. That'd bother me a lot.
well, but that being said, if they can point it out with that book that you are wrong, then you shouldn't be offended. If you are, then you are offended with what God said, not what that.
Well, I would agree to listen to them, but I would still think that, you know, it would depend a lot on their attitude if they came in. If they said, here, you're doing this wrong and you need me to fix it, then that's not gonna happen.
It is about attitude, and we discussed among ourselves, but we said we have no one that's qualified, so we're simply going to continue to meet. We were active, as I say, we were probably doing more than a lot of the larger congregations in the area. So, given a choice, I'd rather be there than in any of the other congregations around.
Well, again, you know, from what you say, no doubt it's an excellent congregation, but it's not complete without elders. Yes, Mr. Williams.
You know, Paul at least twice talks about teaching in meekness and also speaking to, in love as we grow up, etc.
Mhm.
And that's what we should all really work on, being able to teach in a meek way. So people who need teaching, won't take offense at the teaching.
We have to be very careful how we present it.
Yes. He says in meekness instructing them, and in Galatians 6:1 he talks about if a brother be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself lest thou also be tempted. So we need a lot of meek teaching, but we need to be, clear about the teaching.
Now, Sherry?
I think that I heard something from Steve that, or maybe I dreamed it, but I think he said if they had asked for help, if a congregation had asked for help, and that would make it all shine in a different light.
Oh, yes.
If there were a congregation asking for help, then we would not be right if we didn't help them. So that was the autonomous type thing that, we were talking about. I wouldn't like it if somebody came into my house, and it's kind of the same feeling that you would have if someone came to try and tell you you're doing things wrong just because they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're there by invitation, then I think it's your duty to teach the truth and tell them how to, get it toward that direction.
I think Ted said that.
Yeah.
Ted was talking about autonomy, but,
He said ask.
ask. Yeah, well, you're pretty similar. Isn't that just faithful?
Yes, Jane?
Bible teaches the church to have elders who are qualified to be elders of that congregation. If they don't have people qualified, they can't have elders. But if they have people, excuse me, people that are qualified, that don't desire the office, maybe that needs to be looked into.
Well, and that's always excuse?
It was looked into. Like I say, we had discussion among ourselves.
That is one of the qualifications, that you desire the office.
Right.
I agree. And so he was not qualified.
That's just it.
But, each individual person would have to examine themselves pretty closely to say why I don't desire something that's going to help the church. So, and it's a difficult thing, and it's a scary decision to take that responsibility. But someone has to do it. And if you have a bunch of men, and I don't know how many you're talking about and don't want to know, if you have a bunch of men who don't desire it, then what's the reason? Is there an underlying level of discord? Is there yes, Steve?
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, to be an elder over unwilling flock is a hard deal to do. I mean, you look at who you fin to attempt to lead before you attempt to lead them.
Well,
You can
yes.
be qualified, but the people that you're trying to lead may not want you to lead them. So if you take that job, will that put your faith in jeopardy too? I mean, that puts your soul in jeopardy.
Well, my soul doesn't depend on what people here do. My soul only depends on what I do. So, if they don't agree to follow everything that I say the scriptures teach, that's, and I'm doing my best, then my soul doesn't depend on them doing it. So, nonetheless, I understand what you're saying. If you got someone who doesn't want elders, it's going to be hard to be an elder there. But why does that church not want elders? Is it because they have men who like power and otherwise would not be having it? Or they think they know better than God? Or what? Yes, Mr. Williams.
What Paul says is, if a man desire the office of a bishop, then he is desiring a good work. I don't think Paul means that every elder, prospective elder, has to really desire the work. How many of God's great leaders, like Jeremiah and Moses, said no, 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 to it, and yet God says, you're the one, you've got to do it. Sometimes we have to just show people that they have an obligation here. Now, they may not think they have the ability to do it, or desire for some reason, but obviously, if one becomes an elder, it must be that he's willing to do the work and do it to the very best of his ability. But many times, we just have to tell men, like preaching too, you ought to be preaching. You ought to be an elder. And the person may not have even thought much about it at all, you know, or desiring it. But if a person can do it and can do it better than others, I mean, we ought to tell that person, you get with it.
And I would say the ultimate example of what you're talking about was Jesus. He obviously didn't want to die on the cross, but he did it. So, you know, again, I think that the question of elders, the man has to examine himself first, see if he qualifies. If he doesn't, then he can't. If he does and doesn't want to, then I have questions about why not. But it's still not my place to tell him. He still has to decide for himself.
When the Lord gave the apostles on various occasions the Great Commission to go and preach the gospel in the whole world, that was a daunting kind of thing. I mean, that takes some thinking about doing the impossible, the mission impossible. And that's really what preaching the gospel in the world is the mission impossible. And we've got to believe with God's help we can do the impossible.
Mm-hmm. With God, everything is possible.
But we often need a lot of exhortation along that line.
We need to be prodded a lot. So, any,
Maybe we wait too late to start talking to young men about becoming elders, and being sure that they understand that it's not, an all authority type position, but it is to guide the souls of, you know, to make sure that things that are taught are of sound doctrine, and then they start thinking about their lives, maybe even before they marry.
well, I think they should.
To marry someone who's going to be the kind of wife I need, and then, and help me to guide my children, you know, think about all those things, you know, before they get to be elderly or old enough and grounded in the truth to say, okay, I'm of an age now where I can become an elder.
Yes.
And I've learned enough about it. I look at my life, you know, nobody can talk about me outside of here. I've done good things, I haven't done bad things, my wife is good, I've raised my children in the church. You know, what's stopping me? Okay, and then we get back to the things that we were talking about before.
Yes.
Is it a heart problem? Or is it some underlying, just, you know, I just don't wanna take that responsibility.
Yes. And I agree exactly with what you said. I think that when children are small, you know, 6, 7, and 8, we should be telling them that one day you should want to be an elder, or you should be an elder. And you should live your life in such a way and plan to be an elder, because these things don't happen by accident. You know, you have to plan it from an early stage to meet these qualifications. And as you say, you can't just wake up one morning at 40 or 50 years of age and say, hey, I want to be an elder, let's go see what it says. That doesn't work. It has to be something planned for. So, I think, you know, talking about it here, obviously, but in the younger classes that we have, I think it also should be taught what the qualifications for elders are. And they should know that. Anyone else? Either everybody hates me or everybody's tired. So. Oh, okay. Well, moving on. Who are the elders supposed to watch over? Well, when you look at the scriptures, appoint elders in every city. And then in Acts, it said they appointed elders in every church. And in other places it says, among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. And then in 1 Peter 5, it says, which is among you. So it's very specific about who they were to be watching over. It was, first of all, you got to be in the flock to watch over it. I can't watch over a flock in the next county. So, what type of authority do elders have? Excuse me, yes.
I might just make this simple observation. You, as a shepherd, is a sheep of Christ,
Yes,
but you are also a shepherd for Christ's sheep.
yes. Yes, I am still a sheep.
Have responsibility, discipline too.
Excuse me?
Discipline as well as education.
Yes. Are you answering the question on the board? Okay, so they do have the authority to discipline. They are supposed to educate. I guess I'm looking for broader answers. They only have authority in the congregation they are located. They don't legislate. They don't make new laws. They cannot write laws or make creeds. We only have authority in the realms of expediency and things that are taught. We are enforcers. So, yes, sir.
One time in Harry Pickup School, one preacher was getting up and saying that elders had no authority at all. And both Farrell and I pointed out to him that the Greek word hegemon, which means leader, I mean in its simplest meaning, its most basic meaning, is used also for Roman governors and even the emperor himself. Now that's not to say necessarily that the elder should have that degree of authority legislative, but at least, I mean, when hegemon is used for an elder, the basic meaning is leader, but again, leaders are often ones with authority to get people to follow.
Now, can elders delegate their authority? No? Sure we can. We tell teachers, you go teach this. We tell the deacons, you go do this. So yes, we can delegate our authority within the realms. Yeah, the teachers, the class. Can we delegate authority to another church? No. But we do delegate all the time. We tell someone to go do something. That's delegation. Yes, Jim?
I'm gonna have to fall back on the old business management semantics. You can delegate responsibility, but you can't delegate authority.
Well, I agree.
And I think that's what you're saying up there. The responsibility to teach, you can basically delegate that responsibility to those teachers. But I would still say that you cannot delegate your authority. I know it's semantics, but
Yeah. And my response to that, to flesh it out a little more, would be when the 7 were chosen at the Church of Jerusalem, what authority did they have as far as distributing the food? They had the authority to gather it. They had authority to parse it out. They didn't go to the apostles and ask them every time, is it okay for me to give this lady, this loaf of bread? So obviously they had some authority. So,
that was regarding the physical needs of those in the Catholics.
no, actually that was Jerusalem. But they delegated that authority. Now, it resided ultimately in them. They had responsibility for it. And if it wasn't working right, they had a responsibility to go fix it. But they delegated authority. So, okay. Anyone else?
The Old Testament, it said that the things that are written for our learning, that we through the patience of the Scripture might have hope. When Moses had all of the authority, and his father-in-law, what was his name?
Jethro.
Jethro told him, so you can't take this responsibility. You have to delegate this authority to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Has it changed in the church?
I do not think so.
I don't think so either. I think you have to delegate authority, because the elders can't do everything, they can't be everywhere and do everything. Especially when the congregation gets a large number of people and you have, elders, you have to delegate authority.
Well, when you got more than two people, there's gonna be someone who's gotta be boss. Yes, Mr. Williams.
Now, this is a time when a person may have authority to do something, but he does so inexpediently. Moses was just wearing himself out. In fact, even if he didn't have to sit as a judge for all these cases coming before him, etc., which took even more time of his time. So he was just wearing himself out, and he didn't have the ability. And what his father-in-law told him was, you are doing the inexpedient thing. And as Brother Steve said, you've got to have lesser judges to handle those matters so you can attend to the more important ones.
Yes.
But he was acting inexpediently. That's the time when expediency is a key thing.
When the apostle appointed those men to oversee the widow, they looked for men that they could trust, that they knew. That
Definitely.
was the responsibility, and that's what elders do. They look for men, deacons, and Bible class teachers that they know can do this. You don't just go and pick people you pick qualified people.
And you certainly don't go pick someone who's just wet from being baptized and tell them they got to go take the word to, this other state. You've got to teach people first. You've got to make sure that they understand and that they're taught before you can do all these things. So, okay. Anyway, can the elders delegate their authority to another church? Well, we looked at those verses, and it's only the congregation in which they are located. And do we find examples in the New Testament where elders did this? Well, the answer obviously is no. There are no examples where the elders of one church told another congregation what to do. They would send aid, and we'll get to that a little later on, but they didn't tell them what to do. Yes, sir.
Yes, even in the case of, Acts 15, Antioch sending men like Paul and Barnabas down to Jerusalem. All it was is what they were teaching on the matter. Did the apostles there teach differently in opposition to Paul or not? And if they did, okay, no problem. Whatever Paul and Barnabas say, we will accept. But if there is some problem here, we really got a problem in the apostleship.
Yeah, we better figure it out, is what they're saying.
If there is, yeah. But of course, that's impossible to have to have that kind of in the apostleship, because the Holy Spirit was really guiding them into all truth.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't go look on the Jerusalem website and see what it was that they stood for.
That's right.
So, okay. So, that's kind of this section. We're kind of going on to another section now, violations of the organization of the church. And this is not going to be just limited to Churches of Christ examples. This is going to be others. And the first one we're talking about is the pastor system. Thankfully, I'm not aware of this formally existing in the church, but I fear that informally it does sometimes. Whenever the evangelist comes in and he makes all the decisions, I think that that's a danger. But, a pastor in today's definition means a minister or a priest in charge of a church. And again, this violates what we've been taught because it's a single person. The second definition, a person having spiritual care of a number of persons, that's okay. Elders do that. But it's not a single person. 1 Peter tells us, what the pastors are. They are the shepherds. They're to serve the flock, not lord or rule over it. They're to be examples. They're responsible to Christ. And they're to watch over the flock. And they're supposed to teach. Those are things that a pastor's doing. However, today, a lot of places don't do that, particularly in Protestant denominations. They may or may not meet the qualifications of an elder or a pastor. A lot of places, they're certainly in the Catholic Church, they're not supposed to be married, and that would violate one of the qualifications. And it said that they have final authority over a local church. Well, again, that violates what we see. So that's one violation that we know of. The other is an association of churches. And again, we have to talk about what is a universal church, a term not found in the Bible. And a local church is a gathered group of believers. The universal church is everybody that's a Christian, dead or alive. So, and this is kind of a busy slide, and you may have trouble seeing it, I'm not sure. But it talks about the universal church is located in heaven and earth, whereas the local church is only here on earth. The universal church, the Lord adds the members. Here, and in the example of Saul, for example, we're told that he went and joined himself to a church. That means that he went and started physically meeting with them. The third one, it's entered into by baptism. And then in the local church, local control. I mean, if we have someone who comes in and obviously, and I'm going to make this point, obviously, not living as a Christian should, we have the right to not let them in our flock. Because we're tasked with protecting the flock that we have, and we have to protect it from wolves coming in. The universal is all saints. Here, and again, that goes back to the first point, in heaven and in earth. In the local church, it's the saints that meet here at this point. It's none but the saved, and sadly, I would say that here on earth, some of the members of a church are not necessarily saved, are not going to be saved, because they fall away. In the universal church, we only have one shepherd, and that's Christ. In the local church, we have the lesser shepherds, the elders. And as far as assembling, you can't get the local church all together in one place here in time and on earth. That can only be done in heaven and the hereafter. And in the universal church, Satan cannot prevail. We're told that. But as we've talked about, too often he does prevail in the local church. So, some people think that the church universal is comprised of local congregations, and they see it like this. You know, you got a bunch of local congregations, and in this case, they'll send representatives from the local congregations to go and decide policy. Well, unfortunately, policy's already been decided. But you'll see things like the Southern Baptist Convention, and you'll see the people voting, yeah, we're going to vote for this, we're going to vote to have, women preachers, or we're going to vote to have homosexual preachers or other things, and they will decide instead of Christ deciding. And these are usually divided into districts. And you'll have the Southwest region, the Southeast region, and all of these regions where these people will get together, and then they will elect delegates to the big one. So that's how that works. And so another violation that we see is things like the mother church. We'll pick back up here. Thank you all for your discussion this morning. It was good.